A huge thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring today's video. It has been so long since I could say that we actually have reasonable priced GPUs that are offering better value than they did last year. It's been some dark times making these GPU recommendation videos. There's been months I just skipped and some months where I'm like, hey guys, why haven't I been doing these? Cause the prices and availability suck. When Nvidia launched the 50 series, they stopped producing the 40 series for a while ahead of time, leading to not a lot of supply, so prices went up. The 50 series didn't initially meet demand, and then pricing was just terrible for a long time, and there was no competition from AMD. Finally, AMD launched their 90 series GPUs, are getting some supply out there, and they've also finished it off with the 9060 class GPUs, bringing in more competition and more supply, and suddenly the GPU market looks a lot more reasonable. If you're looking for a very solid GPU for under $400, the 9060 XT 16GB version, please do not get the 8GB version. I have done so much testing on this. If you like to play anything recent, kind of modern game, the higher settings will struggle with 8GB in many games at graphic settings that are not unreasonable for a GPU of this power. The 9060 XT is going to deliver good performance at 1080p and 1440p and a good upscaler with FSR 4. It's not as available as DLSS. Optiscaler can help with that if you're open to modding things, but you don't want to mod stuff in a like an online competitive game. So there's still some trade-offs with not getting the NVIDIA equivalent, but in general, the 9060 XT 16GB is powerful, has a good upscaler, and even AMD's ray tracing performance has done quite a bit to catch up here. And if you're looking for its direct price class competitor from NVIDIA, it is the 5060 Ti 8GB version. That's at $380, so actually $10 more than the 9060 XT 16GB version, which I'm currently finding in the United States at $370. As always, if you're not in the United States, your region's pricing could be different, so do take that into account. Anyway, so the point is, if you want the best GPU under $400, it's a solid 1080p and 1440p GPU with a good solid feature set, maybe not quite as good as the NVIDIA feature set, but it's close. You got the 9060 XT 16GB. I can wholeheartedly recommend it. Now, I can also recommend War Thunder. Many of you may already know that War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made and is available now for free on PC, consoles, and mobile devices. But did you know that War Thunder runs on the in-house developed Dagor engine, which is heavily optimized to deliver a lag-free experience with impressive visuals and high frame rates, even on lower-end machines, which is one of my favorite things about the game. It's a real breath of fresh air compared to a lot of the unoptimized slop I've tested recently on the channel. But I'm also a huge history fan, which is why I love that you can take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships of 10 major nations, ranging from biplanes and armored cars of the 1920s to the fighter jets and main battle tanks of today. Immerse yourself in the intense combat of War Thunder, where incredibly detailed vehicles, realistic graphics, and authentic sound effects place you right at the helm of the most powerful war machines of our time. Join a worldwide community of over 70 million players in epic PvP battles today and delve into the breathtaking experience that is War Thunder. With an unmatched wealth of high-quality content to discover, there is simply no game better suited for fans of military history. So follow the link in the video description and play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile devices now. New and returning players on PC and consoles that haven't played in the last 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms that includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator, Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. It's available for a limited time only, so be quick. All right, so we have the 9060 XT 16GB. It is the best GPU under $400, but what if you have a little bit more budget? I'll also try to talk about what if you have less, but I'm gonna be honest, there's diminishing returns below this point if you're buying new. Now, if you have a bit more budget to spend, what about the 5060 Ti 16GB version? Some of you guys were screaming at me on the screen already that, why are you comparing the 9060 XT 16GB to the 8GB version? Because they cost the same, and in fact, the 8GB 5060 Ti costs more than the 9060 XT 16GB. So that's why the 9060 XT 16GB got my under $400 recommendation. But if you have a little bit more than $400 to spend, the 5060 Ti 16GB GB is now available around $430. This is the magic of competition, because when this launched, it was not available at $430 in the United States. They were generally in stock around $480, and some models are still that expensive, but now you can actually get some around $430. And at that price, it's close enough to the 9060 XT 16 GB that you might want to make the comparison. Now, the 5060 Ti 16 GB is overall in a similar performance class, but it is a bit more powerful on average. Now, game to game, one can win and the other one can win, or they can tie, but on average in my testing, the 5060 Ti 16 GB is a bit faster. They both have 16 GB of VRAM, but NVIDIA tends to be a bit more efficient on VRAM allocation. Also, the NVIDIA feature set is still a bit better. DLSS 4 still looks slightly better than FSR 4, although they're both extremely usable. I would say the main advantage is that DLSS is available in more games, and while, like I said, Optiscaler can help the 9060 XT get FSR 4 into more games, that doesn't always work, and you don't want to do it in online games with anti-cheat programs. So that's a big advantage. Also, there is the multi-frame generation, so rather than just having a ×2 frame gen mode, NVIDIA's 50 series has a ×3 and a ×4. In my opinion, this is not a massive deal unless you have a super high refresh rate display. We're talking 200 Hz plus, because generally a ×2 frame gen mode, when used from a solid base frame rate, which I would recommend of 50 to 60 FPS, depends on the game really, because some games have a more latency than others at different frame rates, but that's kind of a general baseline. Then you're already getting to 100 plus FPS, so if you're on a 120 Hz display, 140 Hz display, etc., ×2 frame gen's kind of enough. The point is, though, that NVIDIA's feature set is an advantage. It also has, the 5060 Ti has slightly more performance than the 9060 XT 16 GB, so in general, if you have the additional money, I do think it could be considered money well spent. You are getting a better GPU for the additional money that you're spending. That being said, if you want to stay under $400, the 9060 XT 16 GB also gets my recommendation. Now, what if you have additional money to spend? Well, it's nice that I can say that the 5070 is now actually available at its MSRP on a pretty regular basis. There's not always a ton of models right at the $550 MSRP, but there's usually one available most days that I check now. And with one minor caveat that it's a 12 GB VRAM GPU. That's a little bit annoying considering the 5060 Ti has a 16 GB version for less money, but also less performance. Now, in general, right now, the vast majority of gaming situations, especially at the resolutions and settings that would be appropriate to a 5070, so not a lot of 4K, we're sticking more to 1440p and oftentimes even with some upscaling, we are generally fine at 12 GB of VRAM. There are games that can still trip it up, but you can turn down graphics settings and stay within the VRAM buffer. It is annoying you're having to take that into account on a graphics card that costs over $500, but in general, I think for the next few years, probably at least until the next console generation releases, 12 GB of VRAM is going to be pretty comfortable in the vast majority of games, in my opinion. You can't always predict the future, but that's what I have to say. So I would rather have the additional performance on the 5070 and suffer with the 12 GB of VRAM than have the 5060 Ti 16 GB that has more VRAM but less performance. So I do think it is worth the additional money if it's in your budget. Now, some of you guys are like, but buy the 9070 from AMD. It has like a $500 MS or 500. It's the same MSRP. It's blah blah blah. Okay, guys, the thing about the 9070 series is they're still not super widely available at their MSRP. There's a lot of evidence that the MSRP was really a promotional price made available through rebates to the manufacturers that were not really intended to be the actual sales price of these cards. So the 9070, the lowest price model I can find, is available at $600. That is $50 more than the RTX 5070. Now, it is slightly more performant, costs slightly more. It also has 16 GB of VRAM, which is more than the 12. That's certainly nice to have. That being said, though, like I said, there is some NVIDIA feature set advantages. The wider availability of DLSS is a very nice thing. And like I said, multi-frame generation. If you have a card this powerful, I think you're maybe more likely to have a super high refresh rate display, although that might not be the case. In general, there are some reasons here, but also we're starting to get into performance tier where path tracing is not out of the question. DLSS balanced with like RT Overdrive in Cyberpunk or something like that, that isn't in unreasonable territory to get into a pretty decent base frame rate from which then to kick on frame generation, etc. So I really do think there is an argument that I wouldn't necessarily want to spend $50 more on the 9070 when it has some trade-offs. That being said, if you're more drawn to the 16 gigabytes of VRAM, then maybe that would be a way to go for you. And so really, I'm going to say that the best GPU under $600 is either a 9070 or a 5070, and different people are going to be drawn to different things here. I'm going to say that personally, I would probably be drawn towards the 5070 for that single player game feature set, because that's the style of gamer that I am, and I'm willing to make a couple tweaks here and there in some games to stay within the 12 gigabyte VRAM buffer, but I totally understand if you would make a different decision, which is why I'm going to give a split recommendation here between the 9070 and the 5070. I'll also say, though, that the 9070 has been harder to find at $600 and below. It's oftentimes higher than that, but like I said, supply and competition has been improving here. I think AMD's competition with the 9070 series has been forcing NVIDIA to stick closer to its 5070 MSRP and supply a reasonable amount of supply there. And so it's been helping both companies kind of drive their prices down a little bit. Competition's good, guys. Now, what about the 9070 XT? It's meant to be the $600 card, but any ones at that price point seem to be, well, out of stock. So if I look for in-stock 9070 XTs, we're talking $713. Now, the 9070 XT isn't vastly more powerful than the 9070 non-XT, but it is a bit more powerful, and we're starting to get a bit more separation from the baseline 5070. So in this case, I would probably go with the 9070 XT if it was in my budget, but then we also need to start talking about the 5070 Ti. Okay, so the thing is that the 9070, if you look at MSRPs, is meant to be a lot less expensive than the 5070 Ti. The problem is that the 9070 XT just has not been available at its MSRP. It's just out of stock at that, other than, like I said, the limited rebates that seem to be available on launch. So the 9070 XT, though, fortunately now is generally available a little over $700, and for a while there, it was hard to find under $800. So things are settling down, which actually means I do think there's an argument to buy it here over the 5070 Ti. Because if we check in on 5070 Ti pricing, the 5070 Ti is meant to have a $750 MSRP, but it's been hard to find. Not impossible, but hard to find at that pricing. If I was trying to buy today, the lowest price model I can find in stock is $840. That is a lot of money. So the point is that right now there's over a $100 separation between the 9070 XT and the 5070 Ti. Now for some of you that will matter more than others, kind of depends on what your budget is, right? Now I can tell you right now that if the 5070 Ti and the 9070 XT were the same price, you should buy the 5070 Ti. It is more performant on average. It is powerful enough now and has the same amount of VRAM. It has 16 gigabytes of VRAM to handle 4K gaming, 1440p gaming. 1440p with path tracing is extremely doable, whereas the 9070 XT, it is not. So the 5070 Ti is just capable of stuff the 9070 XT isn't, and I'm no longer in the, like, it's kind of strong enough for 1440p path tracing. I'm really like, no, it's pretty solid for that. You want to play RT Overdrive in Cyberpunk with the 5070 Ti, you got it, right? So with all of that being said, if the 5070 Ti and the 9070 XT were the same price, I would unquestionably buy the 5070 Ti every time. It's also more power efficient if that's something that you're looking for. And like I said already earlier in the video, the general NVIDIA feature set advantage on DLSS 4 is more widely available, does still have a bit of an image quality edge, multi-frame generation, etc. And again, at this price point, you might be more likely to be pairing it with like a 240 Hz display, where frame gen can actually be kind of nice, the multi-frame gen version. Anyway, so that's if they cost the same though. But right now, like I said, if I have to pay $840 for the 5070 Ti, it's possible that that's just out of my budget, and the 9070 XT being available at just a little over $700 does feel like a lot less. So I'm going to say that the 9070 XT is my best GPU at $700, and my 5070 Ti, I'm going to say is my Best GPU that's still worth paying for, okay? Because I do think you're getting something for the extra money. It is worth it if it's in your budget, and especially if you're drawn towards single-player titles, where the path tracing performance could mean something to you, and multi-frame gen I think makes sense. Because I don't think multi-frame gen really makes sense in competitive games because it's not making the game more responsive. It actually has a latency penalty. Now, past this point though, this is where we're at significantly diminishing returns. If I look for a 5080, for example, which would be the next step up, and AMD no longer has anything competing above the 9070 XT in their new lineup, the 5080, the lowest price I can find in the United States is $1,400, and the MSRP is meant to be $1,000. It's already questionable whether it's worth spending more than the 5070 Ti, even just going up to $1,000, but it's at least like there's an argument for it. But here, we're talking going up to $1,400 to buy a 5080 from a 5070 Ti. But here's the thing. They both have 16 gigabytes of VRAM. They both have exactly the same feature set. The 5080 only has about 15% more performance than the 5070 Ti. And yet you're spending like, not quite, but almost double the price for 15% more performance. It's absolutely ridiculous. The only reason to buy a 5080 instead of a 5070 Ti is if you literally just want to throw money at a problem and you don't care about the value at all. Yeah, it gets you more performance, about 15%. There's really almost zero situations where I would say the 5080 is now super comfortable playing some game at some setting that the 5070 Ti wasn't. In most situations, if you're not running a frame rate counter, a 15% performance difference is hard to even notice. It's not completely unnoticeable, but it's hard to notice. And generally you can tweak one graphic setting a little bit, gain 15% of performance back, and that's gonna be, in my opinion, a lot better of an idea than spending an extra $700, $800 on this product. Maybe your region's pricing on the 5080 is better, but it's absolutely awful in the United States. And the 5090, well, now we're talking almost $3,000. Now, the 5090 though, is offering incredible performance. You're paying out the nose for it. It doesn't make a value proposition sense. But if you just have a ridiculous amount of money to spend on your gaming PC, let's say you make good money, you're not going into debt for this, you have the $3,000 to spend on it, and you're comfortable doing so as long as you're getting something in return. I will say the 5090 is noticeably faster than literally everything else out there. So if you have $3,000 to spend on your gaming PC, you're not going into debt for this, you're comfortable doing it, you're not gonna miss a mortgage or a rent payment or anything like that. I do think that it's not necessarily stupid to buy a 5090 if you're in a financial position where you can comfortably do that. But it doesn't make a good value proposition other than the fact that you can probably buy this thing and just be happy for many, many years without being forced to upgrade. And if previous generations have showed us anything, it's gonna be a long time before reasonable priced GPUs catch up to this level of performance, which means its resale value will probably stay high for many years to come if we've seen how the 4090 has aged. Speaking of the 4090, in the new market, it's kind of dried up, so they're really not much less expensive than a 5090, and the 5090 is noticeably more powerful. So the 4090 really makes sense more on like a used market situation, but I don't know, personally, I'm not sure I'd be spending thousands of dollars on a used GPU. That's just kind of me. But anyway, that's where we're at with that. Now, so in general, that's my GPUs I can recommend. Essentially, the first GPUs that kind of make sense to buy are the 9060 XT 16 gigabyte cards, but those start at about $370. Then pretty much moving up from there, almost everything has found a spot in the market where you spend a bit more money and you get more for your money, so it makes sense to do it. The only place where I had that real split recommendation was that 9070 non-XT and the 5070, where I think you're gonna have to make a judgment call on the feature sets that you prefer. Here's where we start to run into a problem though. What if you wanna buy a graphics card and you don't have at least $370 to do so? And this is where, unfortunately, I think the new market is just harder to recommend. Because, well, Everything below this in the new generations has 8 gigabytes of VRAM, except for the Intel's options. So maybe let's discuss the more budget-oriented options. I hate the fact that $300 is a budget GPU these days. Entry level, oh man, what happened to GPU pricing and inflation? It's awful. Okay, let's talk. The RTX 5060 comes in at $300. That's its MSRP, and it is at its MSRP. Now, it actually delivers a lot of performance at that price point. It is actually very noticeably faster than something like a 4060. And if you're still on something like a 3060, it also offers more performance when you're not running out of VRAM. The real problem with the RTX 5060 is that it has too much performance and too much price for an 8 gigabyte VRAM buffer to make sense. So if you're somebody who literally only plays esports games, then there's an argument here that this could make sense. But I just can't wholeheartedly recommend it. Now, you also have the 9060 XT 8 gigabyte version, also directly competing at $300. And you actually do get a bit more performance from the 9060 XT. But if you're buying for like esports titles and things like that, I would note personally that NVIDIA's Reflex technology does seem to be integrated into more games. And in that case, latency is usually the reason why you're hunting the higher frame rates and performance in competitive titles. And so, you know, you could go either way on this, slightly more performance versus having reflex and more stuff. And like I said, DLSS 4 a little bit better, but really I just can't recommend either of these GPUs in good conscience. It's just not great to be spending $300 on 8 gigabytes of VRAM right now. That kind of sucks. So what do we have out there? Well, there's the problem, because we do have the Intel B580, but in the United States, the B580 is just not available at reasonable pricing. It looks like I can get one at like $300. Now, the problem is that the B580, while it does have 12 gigabytes of VRAM, it simply does not have as much performance as the cards like the 5060 and the 9060 XT. So it's not really a great value unless it's available at its $250 MSRP, which it's not. So now we're kind of struggling here a bit, right? So what do we do in the under $370 price point? Well, it's difficult in the new market. That's what I'll say. Now, I will say that if you're willing to go into the used market, we can start to look at things like average eBay sales prices and that kind of thing. So if we were looking for something like, let's see what a 6700 XT costs nowadays. If I go like average eBay sales price. So eBay sales prices, these are sold listings in the United States. We can find kind of a category average. It looks like these are selling under $300. They do have a good amount of performance. Unfortunately, with the older AMD products, you're not getting the newer upscalers, which has something to be said for it. Unfortunately, RTX 3080s, I still don't think are in the under $300 range. Now it looks like we're still talking in the over $400 range for our average sales price here. That's kind of frustrating. What's an RX 6800 going for these days? Or a 6800 XT? Yeah, average sales prices just aren't great in the I mean, we can adjust the time frame, but anyway, the point is, I just unfortunately can't wholeheartedly recommend anything new under $300. Now, if you start to get into like RX 6600 type price range, you're at about $200. Then there's something to talk about here. Or you could get a 3060. Which I think new they're starting to dry up. You can still get them. Yeah, actually new, the prices aren't great. You'd probably want to go used on those as well. What's a used RTX 3060 cost these days? And oh, we want to make sure it's the 12 gigabyte version. I should have probably typed that in because there is the scam 8 gigabyte version. The point is, as you guys can see, I'm really struggling here to give you guys some sort of recommendations. Yeah, if you get kind of one of the lower priced 3060s, that's something to look for. But just in general, I've got to say the budget GPU market isn't good in the new market. like I said, really it's the 9060 XTs coming at a 16 gigabyte version where I can start to recommend new GPUs. I hate that I can't really wholeheartedly recommend much below that, other than with the caveat that if you know you're just playing esports, 8 gigabytes is fine. You can still play the newest games, just with turned down graphic settings, still on 8 gigabytes. So you can do it. It's just, if you can save up your budget to get to at least the 9060 XT 16 gigabyte, I really feel like it's worth it. You're going to be able to hang on to this thing for a long time and be very happy with it, whereas below this in the new cards, we're just not in a great situation. All right, that's what I've got for you guys today. Hopefully you guys found the video useful and or interesting. And don't forget, follow the link in the video description and play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile devices now. New and returning players on PC and consoles that haven't played in the last 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms that includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator, Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. It's available for a limited time only, so be quick.